Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
If you've been listening to recent episodes, the last episode of Personality Hacker, I don't know if it was a cliffhanger we left you on, but we basically wrapped up the episode and I jumped in the car. We drove Antonia to the airport to fly from where we live here in Pennsylvania for her to go to Portland, Oregon to visit her dad who has been in the hospital, who just suffered a stroke. If you want to hear some backstory on that, listen to last week's episode. And Antonia just flew back in last night. I picked her up at the airport, East Coast time, 11:30. We got back to our house about 1 o'clock in the morning and then got to bed around 1:30 or 2. Mm-hmm. Got up today, had a few conversations connecting, but I actually haven't gotten to hear on purpose. I've heard a couple little tidbits from your trip over the last 5 days or so, but we purposely didn't talk about it before the podcast. So what you're about to hear here, I haven't even heard most of it. So we could get a true sense of what happened for you and get some authenticity from it and see. I think it's a benefit to you listening as well to hear a raw experience the first day you're back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we didn't post game this much. I told you a couple of the things that are happening in real time, but we haven't had that conversation that we always have after something big happens, which is a post game, right? Where we deconstruct the whole thing and try to figure out what the meaning of everything was. We haven't done that. And so this will be a little bit of a real-time deconstruction on the podcast. And
I keep assuring us, we don't have to publish this if it gets too, weird or intimate. But if it works out well, if you're listening right now, you get to hear it. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's not live, which is good. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what's going on.
So what was the, give us kind of a rundown. What was the trip like?
Yeah. Okay. So I flew in to Portland Wednesday, I believe. And I spent, I was gonna head straight to the airport. To the hospital, but I flew in too late. And so I thought, I'll just chill. And so I didn't go until Thursday.
And your parents didn't know you were coming?
They
were supposed to not know.
They're supposed to not know, but I social media is still something that sometimes evades me. I don't have a super firm grasp on all of it. And just really kind of obvious things sometimes I'm an idiot around. And so I'll make these statements forgetting that people are maybe Facebook friends of mine. I've gotten myself in trouble before by making a statement that was meant to be sort of an abstraction of a conversation I've had with an individual, and I'll start talking about the abstraction, and then it ends up being that the person I had the conversation with is a Facebook friend of mine, and then they take it personally, and I have an oh shit moment where I'm like, oh, of course they're gonna take it that way, and so this I've learned, or I've tried to learn not to do that. I'm still not great, but one thing I also forget is that there are sometimes people who observe, social media posts intended for a different audience, but I never lock anything. I never put privacy settings on anything in my social media. So the point of all this is that I said I was going to Portland in an Instagram story, and my nephew saw that and then immediately called my mom and was like, is Tony going to Portland? Or what happened? Why didn't you let me know that Grandpa had a stroke? So the conversation was, he found out from my Instagram that Grandpa had a stroke. And so he was calling to give my mom a hard time for not having communicated with him. And then also the fact that I had posted that I was going to Portland was also in the mix. And she was just confused by that. She's like, no, she came here a month ago. So I guess you got your dates wrong. But she's an INFJ. So she's got her NI pattern recognition. And so when I showed up, she's like, oh, okay. Now I understand what that was all about. But I completely surprised my dad. I completely surprised him.
Did you just walk in the hospital?
I did. I just found where he was. Actually, my mom had given me the hospital room number, probably thinking I was going to send flowers or something. And so I used that to go find him. And what was crazy is that he was actually walking around on his walker because after his stroke, it affected the right side of his body. And he's at this point probably up to about 70 to 80% of his usage, which is extraordinary considering the size of stroke he had. And so he's an ESTP. He's not going to let this thing get to him. So he's doing his own physical therapy even when the official therapy is over. So he's like constantly pushing himself, and he wants to do everything himself. He's extremely independent, and he's going to get through this thing, right? He wants to get as much usage back. So when I saw him, I walked up behind him, and he was on his walker, like practicing walking. And so I followed him for a little while, and he didn't notice me until he got into his room, and I kind of followed him into his hospital room, and then he sat down on the bed, and he looked up, and it was like he wasn't sure what he was seeing when he saw me. And I came in with flowers. I went and got flowers because quite frankly, that morning I haven't been that nervous in memory. Like, I was so nervous. My palms were sweating. In the same way that I have vertigo. And so when I'm in extraordinary heights, my palms start sweating. Or if I see somebody on a video that's like really high up, my palms start to sweat. It's like a sign of I think I might die. It's like my number one I might die symbol or sign in my body. And I was having that. My palms were sweaty. In fact, just thinking about how I was feeling that morning, my palms were starting to get sweaty.
Wow.
Yeah, I was so nervous.
What were you like? Are you nervous? I mean, you wire it to something that feels like death, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're at a high point. What's going through your experience? Is there anything conscious you're worried about? You have a sense of concern, and it's hitting you in a visceral, almost your unconscious and body. You're in a conspiracy to go, wait a second, are we going to die here?
Yeah, I don't think it was unconscious. I think it was conscious, but I don't think it was logical. Like, there was nothing rational about it.
Gotcha. It was more of an emotion.
Yeah, it was entirely emotional. And so, so I had no rationale behind it. And I just knew that I was super nervous. So that morning, I knew I was so nervous that I was considering not even showing up. So I just went through the motions, and I was like, nope, I have to do this. And so me going and getting flowers, it was like a little bit of procrastination. It was me like wanting to show up with a prop and be able to steady my nerves through it. So I went and bought flowers, and I came in and he saw me, and he's like, he did the response I would expect of him. He's like, hey, you, right? And I came up and I gave him a hug, and he's like, well, like, just basically like at a loss for words. It's like, where'd you show up from? Like, what are you doing here? So I told him that I came to be with him right now while he's in the hospital. And then I came to tell him some stuff that was important for me to tell him. And my mom wasn't there. She wasn't going to be there all day, I guess.
Did she know you were in town yet by this point?
No, she didn't know I was in town. And so I just hung out with my dad for a few hours, actually. And nurses came in and out, and he introduced me to all of the nurses and the doctors and anybody who was there. And I just kicked it with my dad in the hospital room. It was like very casual, and we just had like some casual conversation. And he told me about what happened and went through the story. And he's like, well, what'd you come here to tell me? And I said, I came here to tell you that I know that actually, when he said, what'd you come here to tell me? He's like, did you come to chew me out? He was like expecting me to tell him bad things about him being, like he expected me to like confront him, basically. For some reason, when I said I had some things I wanted to talk to him about, he expected a confrontation. And I said, this is not a confrontation. I just wanted to let you know that I know that having children was the hardest thing you ever did. And he's like, oh, yeah, definitely. I should have never been a father, which is what he's been telling me his whole life. And I said, well, from my perspective, I see that you were the product of neglect. Like, you came from a situation where your parents basically neglected you. You still have pain from symbols of neglect. And I want you to know that you didn't do that to me. You didn't neglect me or leave me, even though parenting was very difficult for you. So I just want to tell you thank you and that I love you. And I appreciate you that you did one better for your kids than was done for you.
And was that received well? Did he like, thanks, or like, how did that go?
Well, and
That's a lot to lay on somebody.
Yeah, this is kind of, so...
This is still the first like day.
Yeah, this is the first day. And he just went, okay. Like it didn't penetrate. So I said it again. I want to let you know that I know you did one better. And it was almost like he was kind of tuning me out. He wouldn't receive it. He wouldn't receive it. He was tuning me out. He's like, okay, well, it was like, what do you want me to say about it? Or like, what do you want me to do about that? Kind of like, almost like I had attacked him almost. And I was like, well, that was it. That's what I flew all the way out here to tell you. And he's like, okay. And then that was it. Like, okay.
Wow.
So yeah, I kicked it with him, and he's like, well, does your mom know you're here? And I'm like, no, I haven't told her. And he's like, you should tell your mom. I'm like, I was actually going to wait for him to tell her because it's not my job, right? I was like, I'm here to see you, Dad. So I didn't, I didn't tell her, and I waited for him to tell her. So at some point she called to check in on him, and then he said, guess who's here? And guess who flew out, right? And I could hear her over the phone because it was speaker, and it was a pause, and then she just went, Tony. And he's like, yep, Tony's here. So then he took her off speaker, and they had a private conversation for a moment, and then he hung up the phone and said, your mom's on her way out. She's going to come out and see you. So then my mom showed up a little bit later after it was very casual hanging out with them. I've always had a very easy relationship with them, which I think is actually part of the problem. And I'll tell you why that's a part of the problem in a moment. But the way this all played out, everything that's in my favor actually worked against me. That was that. In retrospect, I realized that everything, because you didn't actually ask me how it went, so the listener is going to have it unfold in front of them. But I will say, just to let the cat out of the bag, it didn't go well. This wasn't a cinematic movie moment, unless you're talking about like those 1940s old gruff Scrooges that yell at people. And you can't get anywhere with them. Like, this wasn't like It's a Wonderful Life ending. So, and one of the reasons why it didn't go very well is because of all these things in my favor, actually, weirdly enough. And I'll explain what that means in a moment. But it was very easy. And when she showed up, it was very easy to be around her too. And the challenge here too is that there were so many distractions. Every time my mom and I started talking, another nurse comes in to take stats, or another doctor's coming in and he's being released the next day. So a clinical psychologist comes in to talk to him to make sure that, he's not suicidal. And then another nurse comes in to let him know, blah, blah, blah. And then my dad wants to take a shower. So so she's got to set him up in the bathroom to be able to take a shower. And oh no, where did I put my sweatpants or whatever? So so it's just distraction after distraction. But I'm starting to have a conversation with my mom, and I tell her I came out to talk about a couple things. But the first thing that I really wanted to talk about with her was family lore. Like, I feel like I'm missing big pieces of family lore that I'd like to talk with her about. And she's like, yeah, that makes sense, right? So she's all on board with this concept of the family lore conversation, which I'm being really honest about. That was very sincere. I've never really had a full family lore conversation with either of my parents. So there's a lot of sort of institutional family knowledge that I'm unaware of. And I wanted to have a family lore conversation with her. And then I said, on top of that, I also think I feel like you guys need to have a real conversation with me about my life choices, because you haven't talked to me in nearly a decade and you don't know who I am anymore. And yet you'll make comments about what I must be thinking. And every time you make a comment about what I must be thinking, you're always wrong. Like 100% of the time you're wrong, because you're patterning it after bad information or a lack of information. So I feel like we should have a conversation around that too. And my mom, I could tell she's very curious. Like, she had very much an energy of curiosity. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to have the conversation with her that I wanted to because, nurses and doctors, and my dad's tired now, and now he wants to sleep. And my mom's tired because, she's been with him. And so maybe this was like a bad time to do all this because of their, like the distraction of my dad's health being like a legitimate issue. And at the same time, I had to take the opportunity when I could, because this is one of those, bend the rules moments.
Yeah, any life change, like when our daughter was born, there was a window, an opportunity to have some conversations as well, because there's a new child in the mix. And so any type of life change, the rule set allows, the rule set, quote unquote, the rule set allows for some opening of conversations to happen.
Right. And so I have to take the opportunity while I can. And unfortunately, it's just not ideal. So I go home that night. I'm supposed to come in the next day. He's being discharged from the hospital. And they're like, you can come in anytime in the morning. And I realized I was like, I think there's going to be a lot more of the same, right? It's going to be a lot more prodding and doctors and nurses. And so I call in to my parents. I'm like, so maybe I shouldn't hang out with you today because it's going to be a lot of this and you'll probably be tired after all of it. And they say, yeah, that's probably for the best. And once you come on Saturday, I'm like, okay, that sounds good. And my mom had also talked about me helping her organize her place and try to figure out what to do with a bunch of stuff. And that's something that I could help her with. And I'm like, okay. So Saturday, I end up having tea in the morning with Melissa, one of the people who helps us out with profile training and lives in Portland. And that was great. And then after we do that, I head over to my parents a little later in the afternoon. It's like 1 or 2, maybe it's as late as 3. And when I show up, the climate is very different, right? Because
this time it's not a surprise.
It's not a surprise.
They're expecting you. They've had some time to reflect, the whole day to reflect on the first visit.
Yeah.
2 days before.
Oh, I know what happened. It was about 2. And I show up and my dad said I guess they had to run him to the hospital early that morning. And so, I mean, like in the middle of the night, and there was I guess he had a blood clot and his foot was starting to swell and it was like a big deal. And so they run him to the hospital and he's there for like 4 or 5 hours. And anyway, the point of all this is that yet another medical emergency and they're exhausted. So my mom's laying down to take a nap and I grab my dad and I'm like, hey, you want to go do a prison break? And he's like, yeah, let's go do it. So then he hops in my car and then we just drive around like the Camas-Washougal area because my parents live in Washougal, Washington. And they drive me by old houses that they lived in, when I was a kid.
Did you get to see that house they showed me when I was there?
Yes.
And you didn't get okay, cool.
Yeah, I got to see the house that they lived in right before they moved to California, which is when I was born. And then for like a year or 2 stint when I was like really little, they moved back up to Camas. So I got to see the house that I was in when I was like a baby. And then they moved back down to Southern California. So there's these houses that are important to them that I've heard about. And then, yeah, I mean, the point is that he got to drive me around and show me all these things that were important to him. And, this is an end of life type of situation, right? He's like kind of sharing experiences and memories that meant something to him when he was younger. And it was a really good afternoon. Like he showed me things that meant something to him in the past. He was showing me things that meant something to him now. He filled me in on a little bit of like what he's mostly retired, but not 100%. And he showed me a little bit about the work he's doing with somebody who was a business associate like 30 or 40 years ago. And he's just being dad, right? Monopolizing the conversation, talking about, which is the thing he does. He's an ESTP who's usually an output. So he's usually just talking all the time. And that's fine. That's been our dynamic most of my life. Is I just sit there and absorb, and it was nice. It was like really, really nice. And
so this sounds like it's going great.
It sounds like it's going great, right? So it's about time for dinner. So my dad says, well, let's head back and see where your mom's at. Let's see if she's up and making dinner. So we head back, and this is after a couple hours of us, just palling around.
And at this point, I'm checking in as the feeler here. The emotions you're having now, is the nervousness gone? Do you have a sense of like what's happening for you right now? Everything's going well. You're feeling good. You feel like, oh man, he's more connected than I expected. This is feeling a really good weekend. Like this is happening and we're able to have some conversation I want to have. I'm getting family lore. There's some closure maybe of like, end of life stuff he's talking to. What are you experiencing at this point?
Yeah, so far so good. My nerves are gone. Everything feels like it's great. Everything feels like it's heading in the right direction. And I'm like, man, I've got this figured out. Like I can navigate through these waters for maybe the first time ever. And I'm super excited by that.
Did you start getting attached to outcome at all? Because remember last episode we talked about you're going to go not thinking in terms of outcome at all. Did that come up for you?
I totally unattached from outcome.
Even now while it's going well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that would be my challenge here. I'd be like, oh, this is going so well. And then I'd start to think about all the positive outcomes that are going to come from it.
No, I try to stay with process and be unattached to outcome. And thank goodness I was. Because how it ended up unfolding, if I had been attached to outcome, I would have probably been crushed. So I'm glad I didn't. But yeah, no, I stayed unattached to outcome. I was like, this is about process. This is about what's like just going through it and doing the best I can, reaching out and trying to create the best outcome possible, but knowing that it's not 100% on me.
What do you think your parents were feeling at this point? Do you think they were feeling connected back to you? Did you sense, like, you said the mood shifted, but then your dad goes and spends all afternoon with you. So that mood shift you're talking about, was that like a...
Well, actually, the mood didn't shift until after that. That's why I said, I remember what happens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I spent the afternoon palling around with him, and the mood was very similar to how it had been at the hospital. And so it wasn't until I got home. So my mom's up now, and she didn't really sleep, so she's tired and exhausted, and my dad's tired and exhausted. And that's not ideal, but I'm like, so I didn't push anything, right? I just my mom had already eaten. She gave me a little bit of food to eat. My dad had a little bit of food to eat, and we're in the living room, and I'm just not pushing. I'm just casually talking about things that are interesting, and they keep censoring their language, right? My mom keeps censoring herself, and well, I was going to talk about this person that you remember, but but you're not going to want to hear about them because they're still in the religion or whatever. And I'm like, Mom, that's what I keep trying to tell you, is that it doesn't offend me if you talk about your religion. Like, it doesn't offend me in any way. And then that's when the mood started shifting, because now, after she censored herself and then projected something she believes about me onto me, and then I respond with, that's not the position I take, then all of a sudden the mood starts to change, because and I've done some personal deconstruction of my own, but it's like there's a belief they need to have about me, that as long as we don't touch any of that, as long as I don't assert that I'm going outside of this model in their mind, everything is fine. But the second I take exception, like she represents something that I'm thinking and she's inaccurate, and I'm like, Mom, I don't feel that way at all, now things are not okay, right? And but I can see I'm entering territory that's dicey. And so I go, it's like 8:30 now at this point, and they've been tired all day, and I can tell that they're powering down. So, I'm like, okay, this is time for me to go. And, but it's Saturday, and I still have all of Sunday and Monday morning before I ship out. So, so I look at my mom, she looks at my dad, and she goes, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but I'll just be really chill about it. And so I look at I address my mom, and I say, well, it's 8:30. You guys probably are super tired, so I should probably get out of here. What time is your church service the next day? And do you want me to come after that? And she's like, well.
And you're probably like, oh boy, here it comes.
I'm like, here it comes. She's like, well, I just don't want to have any conversations with you. Like all of this, it's just too easy to get into this mode, right? Like basically she was talking about the rapport we're in. We're in a very easy parent-child rapport. And she's like, and I just don't want to hear anything you have to say about anything, because you're not going to convince me of anything. Like, you're not going to convince me. And they literally said, we believe we are 100% in the right and you are 100% in the wrong. And so since we know we're right and we know you're wrong, I just don't want to hear anything you have to say.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, like, not that I didn't know that. Obviously that's been their position from the beginning. So it's not like I'm surprised by that. And so I just try to very gently navigate. And I'm just like, well, but Mom, it's not like, at no point in any conversation I would have with you would I ever attempt to, undermine your belief structure. Like, I don't even think that would be a kind thing to do. Now, at around this time, my dad gets really antsy, right? Like, and that's what he's always done. When things get, emotionally antsy or nervous, or if it goes into territory that he's not comfortable with, he gets very physically antsy. But now he's had a stroke and he doesn't have full, motion of his right side. And so he's getting up and down like he normally would and walking around, but it's also awkward, right? And it's distractingly awkward. And so instead of being able to have like a conversation with my mom and just like really address her authentically and directly, my dad's nervousness around all this. And by nervousness, I don't think he would ever say he was nervous, but it's like a nervous energy, right? There's like an anxious energy that starts to infest the conversation. And he gets antsy and he's got to get up and down, but now he's distracting and getting up and down. So his old strategy is now very difficult to implement.
And your mom being an INFJ is probably, and he's also just had a medical issue. So she's attuned to, oh man, this guy, her harmony process is like, we got to meet needs. Like there's something going unmet here. So it's causing her to have anxiety, I'm guessing too. Is she feeling anxious too?
Yeah, like a little bit, but it's it's kind of, it's so difficult to like penetrate these walls, right? Because they have so many walls up already. And now they have distraction on their side, because now everything is a distracted interchange, right? Because it can't just be me honing in on one of them and just like having a real moment. Everything is a distraction now, right? And my dad unconsciously amps it up by being antsy, right? So I'm like, so my dad's coming in and out of the kitchen and he's up and down, and my mom's like half paying attention to him to make sure he's not like, gonna fall or whatever, which is right now, everybody's so worried about him falling, right? Like it's all about whether or not dad's about to fall. And he's really like, he's an ESTP and he's always been, like light on his feet. And
this is new for everybody.
Yeah, like he's resentful that everybody thinks he's gonna fall, right? And he's giving everybody hell about this. I'm not gonna fall, right? And so it's all about whether or not dad's about to fall. So I'm trying to have a conversation with her, and my dad, who could have just sat there in his recliner like most 80-year-old men who just had a stroke would do, he's got to be up and down and moving the whole time. So he's distracting from the conversation. So I'm trying to have like a moment with my mom to assure her that I would never attempt to undermine her beliefs. And in particular, why would I attempt to do that now after they've poured their entire lives into this belief structure? I'm like, I would think it would be a cruel thing to attempt to undermine that. And that's not like what I said was not at all. It didn't have the effect that I wanted it to have.
Going meta is a threat. Yeah. Basically, you went meta and said, look, I'm not going to threaten this, but by doing that, it's a threat because you went meta on the entire discussion.
I did. And so now my dad's really anxious. Okay. Cause like he's hearing a meta conversation, which is very, very disturbing to him. And the reason why this is so disturbing, I should probably, my parents will never hear this podcast. And
well, if they do, is it true?
Yeah. Well,
do you love them?
I do love them, but I'm just saying, like, I know my parents will never listen to this podcast. I know it for a fact. And so,
I'd recommend we don't use their names, but I think you should be forthcoming and honest with what you say, and not honest like you would be dishonest, but say your truth.
Right. Well, what I'm trying to establish is that they'll never hear this podcast, and I want to be respectful anyway. And that said, there was a piece of information that I was given a couple of years ago that just helped me reframe all of this. And that is, this is like 4 degrees of separation. I may have even said this on the podcast at one point. I don't remember though. But this is something my mom told my sister-in-law, who told my brother, who told me. All right. So we're talking about like, this is a game of telephone. The story as I hear it is that they're sitting in bed, or my dad's laying with his back to my mom and my mom's sitting up in bed reading one evening. And I don't know when this happened, but I'm going to assume it was at least 30 years ago. My dad rolls over to my mom and very sincerely says, "What if none of it's true? What if all of this is a lie? What if we're pouring all of our time and effort into something that isn't real?" So now my mom told my sister-in-law this, like around the time that my brother was, sort of reevaluating his relationship with this, with the faith, the religion of his youth. So my mom was like saying this to my sister-in-law as a sign of triumph. And like, this is a strategy she should be using, right? My sister-in-law should be using. But my mom told my sister-in-law that after my father said that to them while they were laying in bed, my mom turned to him and pointed at him, right? Like in a chastising way, and said, "You just get that out of your head right now, mister." And he didn't say anything back, and he rolled over and he went to sleep. So at some point in the last 3 or 4 decades, my dad had some doubts, at least one huge one. And my mom didn't allow him to talk about it with her. She like stamped it down. In fact, she commanded him to not think about it. So that's an insight into the dynamic, and that's an insight into my dad. And so now he's 80, right? Or pushing 80. And he's facing his mortality. And at some unknown time in the past, not only was he not allowed to talk through his doubts, he was told by a woman who he deeply loves and has been the most important relationship in his life, that he's not allowed to even entertain the thought. And I think the fact that they were in bed together, right, like in the most intimate marital scenario, I think that's part of it, right? Like I think the fact that he was so in love with my mom and has always been. The two of them together, everybody says they say they're adorable because they're like young married people who just got married. And they're super cute and super adorable. But I also see the codependence. I see the unwillingness to call each other on anything, really. Like my mom's allowed my dad to get away with bad behavior, and my dad has allowed my mom to get away with bad behavior. And they have an unwritten contract between the two of them. I will not call you on stuff that I can't handle if you won't call me on. I won't call you on stuff that you can't handle if you don't call me on stuff I can't handle. And so they just don't. They just don't call each other on anything. And so they are an absolutely tight-knit, codependent, united front on all this, right? Like the second I enter territory that is unacceptable to my dad, it's suddenly unacceptable to my mom, even though I can tell she's so curious. Like she's so curious. She wants to hear my story so bad. She's so curious. But my dad cannot tolerate it at all. He cannot tolerate even the tiniest little bit of my story. Because I suspect that it will go all the way back to that moment when he questioned himself and he was told he was not allowed to even entertain the thought. Whereas not only did I entertain the thought, but I took action. I left, right? So I am scary dangerous. Just my existence is dangerous.
Well, at this point, at 78, almost 79, there's so much invested. So much has already been sacrificed. Potential successful career, job opportunities, certain lifestyle choices. Like he's sacrificed so much that if you get in there and there's any crack and that crumbles at all, you look back of a life and maybe he would still come to the conclusion it was a valuable life, but there's a possibility he could look back and go, I wasted what I was given in this life.
Yep.
And the only hope he has now in some ways, because he's lost all three of his children, your sister to death, but you and your brother to leaving the religion, both of his grandchildren he doesn't really have access to because of this. And now the very thing of a promise of something after life, you threaten just by showing up and choosing different viewpoints or different ways of living. You represent death, really, like the death of his life of what could be in the future. Does that make sense? Like that's how I see it.
Yeah, I represent all of the lost potential, and and different choices he may have made, because I'm making them. I'm making the choices maybe that he would have made, and so so I'm like a troubling character, and it's so easy to fall back into a good dynamic. And I think that was starting to bother them. Every time I'm around, we fall into this really easy, casual dynamic of back and forth and interchange. And it's so easy that it's almost like they think I'm putting a spell on them because they're trying to hold firm, right? They're trying to observe their conscience. So at this point in the conversation, I'm like, Mom, I would never do that. That's not my intent. I just wanted to tell you my story of sort of my path. And I don't even think that I would need to address doctrine to tell you my path. Like, I would just tell you basically what happened to me in the last 15 years to get me from where I was, who you thought you knew, to who I am now. And now my dad, he becomes hostile, right? He's like, no.
Was he in the kitchen or was he back in the living room?
No, he's back in the living room now. And he's hostile. Like he went from 0 to 60 in about 30 seconds. Like he went from everything's fine as long as we keep it shallow to me saying, I feel like if I just told you my story, like you wouldn't, like all I'm trying to do is help you form a better pattern. Because my mom goes, well, I'm just making guesses, Tony. I'm just making guesses. And I'm like, yeah, but Mom, you're an INFJ. You're an intuitive. You use pattern recognition and you trust your pattern recognition. And she's like, yeah, you're right. I do. I'm like, so when you tell me I'm just making guesses and I don't know, I mean, you might be saying that for my benefit, but I know for a fact you are trusting your guesses and you're making these patterns based on no information at all. And I feel like it would actually make you feel better if you knew where I was at, because most of the guesses or projections or patterns that you are projecting onto me, they're worse than reality. Like reality is not as bad as you're thinking. And I think it would actually be a comfort to you to get like a true statement or have good quality information.
Why do you assume she wants to feel good and have comfort?
Well, right?
I mean, that's an assumption you're making, but like...
Yeah, it is an assumption. It was a major assumption that I made, and I wasn't right. My assumption was wrong. I don't think they want to feel better. I don't think that they want to feel good about me at all. And so at this point, like I said, my dad starts getting hostile, and he's like, because I said, I feel like your patterns could be better. And he goes, stop talking. And I go, what? He's like, stop talking right now. I'm like, Dad, I'm not saying anything that would be threatening. And he goes, stop talking right now. I'm like, well, Dad, oh no, excuse me. My mom, I remember what happened. My mom had just made an assertion about me that was inaccurate. That's what happened. She had just said, well, you, and I don't even remember what the assertion was, but it was wrong. It was not accurate. And of course it just bugged my TI, right? She goes, well, you blah, 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 blah. And there were so many of them that day, so many times when she asserted something that was not accurate that I don't remember what that specific one was. I just remember that she misrepresented me. And that's when I said, Mom, that's not how that's not how that works, right? And then my dad goes, stop talking. Like he's involved, right? All of a sudden he wants to be involved. And he's like, stop talking right now. I'm like, but Dad, I'm just trying to indicate to Mom. And he goes, stop talking right now. Right? Wow. Like I'm a kid, like I'm a teenager, right? And yeah, I'm in his house, but
you're probably triggering some of this for them. I mean, as a parent, you probably never stop seeing your child in some of the ways you saw them at one time.
Right. Yeah.
Those dynamics are so easy to fall into.
Right. But I'm not falling into it because he's my dad, but I'll be 41 next month. It's not like I'm 17. And I go, Dad, like, I don't really think that Mom gets, I don't think she has the right to say I feel a certain way or think a certain thing when I don't. So I'm basically saying that's not a fair position to like basically misrepresent me and then tell me that I'm not allowed to talk, right? And to just like, I got to eat it. And he goes, that's it. I'm calling the police. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
He goes, I'm calling the police. Gail, get my phone. Get my phone right now. I'm going to call the police and you're going to get out of here. And I'm like, Dad, you're going to call the police on me? He's like, you're damn right. I'm going to call the police on you. And so he's like, where's the phone? I'm going to call the police right now. And my mom goes, you're not going to call the police. You don't need to do that. You don't need to call the police. And I at that point I went, actually, Dad, if that's how you feel, I'm going to just take off right now. Like and by the way, nothing has been talked about.
There's been no content.
There's been no content. Like
you're talking about something.
I'm talking about like whether or not we would have this conversation,
wow.
Right? Like just whether or not a conversation would happen, not even the content of the conversation. And my dad is like, he's looking at it now. It was kind of sad because my dad like gets this fury in him, but he's still a 78-year-old man who just had a stroke. So he's like stumbling. Right? He's like, that's it. I'm looking for the phone, and he's waiting for the strength of his youth, right? But he can't even he tries to get up, and he can't, and he stumbles, and now like I'm concerned for him falling. Right? This whole thing about Dad falling is now maybe going to be a reality because I'm there distressing him so much, right? And so, it was kind of awful. Actually, it was kind of terrible, and I just went, you know what, I came here to say something. And both my parents in a very hostile way go, well, you already said it. And I'm like, Mom, did you hear what I came to say to Dad? And she's like, yeah, you've already said it. And I was like, well, I just want to say one more time, Dad, that I'm grateful to you that you broke the pattern and you were kind, like you stuck around for me. And at this point, like everything's bad for my parents, right? Like everything has turned bad and ugly. So my dad goes, you sound like this is a script. This is a script. You're not even saying anything to me. This is just a script. Like you just keep repeating the same thing over and over. Like, well, I like for you to receive it. I might be saying it over and over because I want you to receive it. And he's like, this is a script. And so I said, okay, I'm hearing you. Oh, and then my mom said, excuse me, before I said I'm hearing you, my mom said, every time you show up, it makes it worse. Every time you come here, it makes it worse. Just when I think I'm okay, you show up. And then my dad said, yeah, that's right. You just show up unannounced. You just came here with Piper a month ago, unannounced, with Joel and the boys. And I was like, that wasn't unannounced. But, like he's had a stroke. So like the details are spotty. But sure. He's basically, he indicated, he goes, every time we think we're fine, you show up unannounced. I'm like, well, this is the only time I've ever shown up unannounced, but I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you. And I will honor that. I said, I feel like I've been very respectful about your beliefs and about your position. And I'll try to respect this too. So I start to leave. And then as soon as I start to leave, my mom goes, and it's not a very big house. So like I get up, I walk from the couch to the door, which is maybe 5 strides. And just as I'm about to leave, and I'm like, and I did say, okay, so this is, before I got up to leave, I said, this is the last time I'll see you guys again. Like I'm hearing you, I'm listening to you. This will be the last time I see you again. So I start to leave, and my mom goes, just a minute, I want to say something. So she gets up to follow me. And she said, you and your dad have been doing all the talking and I don't get to talk. And so I said, I go, okay, I'm not going to leave having just been lectured. I want you to know that I'm not going to, I have a boundary there that I'm going to have you guys kick me out and say, you don't get to talk. But then as my hand is on the door and I'm about to leave, now I get 2 big lectures, right? Or I get a big lecture. So this is me being salty. This is me being not at my best, because otherwise I probably should have just taken it just as like a last final gift to them or something. But I'm just like, okay. And then my dad gets upset. Oh, this is you being respectful. This is you being respectful. And I'm like, well, I've got a boundary here. And then my mom says, oh, so you understand what boundaries are? I'm like, yeah, I understand what boundaries are. And she's like, well, you haven't respected our boundaries. I'm like, how have I not respected your boundaries? And she goes, because this is our conscience and you keep offending our conscience by showing up. Like you keep offending it by trying to talk to us. And this is our conscience. And I'm like, well, I didn't realize that just by being here, I was stepping over a boundary. I didn't know that. And I said, and she goes, well, you are. And I said, okay, well, I won't do that anymore. And so I told Mom, I said, before I go, I just want to say thank you. I know you did your best as a mom. You did everything you could. You also ended some of the cycles, some of the patterns. And I want to thank you for having, like, I know that I have a safe perspective on the world because you rocked me to sleep every night. I think she rocked me to sleep every night until I was like 2 years old or something. And I said, I'm sure I have an overwhelmingly safe perspective on reality because of that. And I want to thank you for that. And I said, I know that it sounds like I'm a broken record, Dad, but I want to thank you too. So then I turned to go and he, again, like for the second or third time. And he goes, wait a minute. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, yes. He goes, I want a hug. I'm like, wait, what? You want a hug? You want to throw me out of your house, but first you want a hug? And he's
You almost called the police on me like 2 minutes ago.
Yeah. I'm like, what is this? And I'm just more confused than anything. And he goes, well, I want to hug my daughter goodbye. And I'm like, okay, all right. So I give him a hug and he holds me for a long time. And I said, I love you, Dad. Goodbye. And I gave my mom a big hug and I kissed her on the cheek and I said, I love you, Mom. Goodbye. And the last thing I said before I left is, the doors are never closed and the bridges are never burned. So if you want me at all in your life, you let me know. But unless you let me know, this is goodbye. And they said, okay. And I walked out the door.
Man. This wasn't supposed to happen this way.
Well, but I mean, if...
like from their perspective, you're supposed to leave angry and flipping them the bird and being rebellious, and like you weren't supposed to come back and give love to them. Like, it's not the template they were... Like, this isn't how they expected this all to go down.
Probably not. And it probably I mean, this is obviously the story from my perspective. If you asked them, it probably went different. I don't know. I don't know how they would interpret it if a person were to ask for a rundown of it. And it also sounds like I kept composed the entire time, whereas they were getting themselves amped up. And I know that that's probably an unfair characterization. But the reality is that I was militantly calm. Like I had done a bunch of mental training before I got there to make sure that I was militantly calm. And I was trying to break a pattern, actually, because they have the ability to amp me up. Just like, I mean, I think it's probably pretty common that it's easy to fall into old dynamics with people. It's easy to have people you love so much be able to push all your buttons. And I've done a ton of work to not be amped up. But they haven't. They haven't done any work around that. And they are so codependent on each other. Like they're so good at it that when there was a rogue element that was about to point out any codependence between the two of them, because if I start getting my dad to question, that means he has to acknowledge that 30 odd years ago, my mom told him to stop thinking about it, right? Like it's not just going to interrupt their paradigm. It's going to interrupt the relationship. And as far as I'm concerned, the paradigm was my dad's bargain to have the relationship with my mom that he wanted. Like those were her terms. And so he said, okay. And so for him, it's not just losing his life of opportunity. He basically gave up his life of opportunity, not for the religion, but for her. And then she basically promised him that it was going to turn out. Not in any, you didn't articulate that, but that's, I believe, the unspoken agreement is that he gives up everything for her and then she leads him on the right path. That's the bargain. And so if I start worming in there as this little representation of him and her together, and I say, yeah, that path wasn't, there's other paths, then not only is he going to lose his religion, but now he has a reason to resent my mom, which is an unacceptable feeling for him. He can't feel anything negative towards her like that. She's his everything. So here I am threatening everything.
You're up against incredibly formidable forces.
Yeah. And that's
resolute, formidable forces.
Absolutely. And so effectively what I heard, and when I said I hear you, and I want to honor that, is what I heard was a request from both of us. Please let us die in peace. That's what I heard. I heard, let us die in peace. And as painful as that is, if I was being sincere in my gratitude to them, if I was being sincere in my thank you for breaking these patterns, and thank you for raising me in a way that allowed me to have a sense of safety in the world, and thank you for not neglecting or rejecting me, right, at the time of my childhood, because it's hard enough at like 40, but I'm sure it's devastating at 4. Like, it's hard to get over it when it's at 4. When it's at 40, you can kind of figure it out. So I felt like if I really believed that, then that meant that that the gift I could give them is their final request of me. That's their last request. Let us die in peace. So I said, okay. And they might change their mind later. I don't think they will. I don't know what I was expecting. Parents who would be willing to basically ignore their child for 8 years, right? And not talk to her at all. There's a character there, right? Like to go, you don't believe what I believe, and so therefore we don't talk to you. Like, I can
But
blame
if the
it.
rules of the religion change, they would change their opinion immediately. This is definitely based on the paradigm they're a part of.
I don't know if that's the case.
You think they'd still treat you this way, even if the religion changed its opinion and said, you know what? Don't have this whole shunning type situation.
They might, but this is so integrated into who they are at this point that I don't know if they, I mean, it's like, it kind of, at a certain point, and I've seen this with other older people, like your parents in particular, actually, your dad, Joel, is that there are the tenets of the religious ideology, and then there's their interpretation of it, and what they double down on is their interpretation of it. Like, they double down on the way that they learned it and what it meant to them, and the kind of, it's almost like their character grew around it. And so if it changes on them, it's almost like they don't know what to do about that, because their character molded to the version that they were the most familiar with over the years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
And so if it was like all of a sudden like, oh, hey, we were wrong about that thing, and they now had to accommodate for that, I don't know if they could do it that easily. I don't know if they could do it in time before their deaths. I'll just say that. So if they're willing to do that, if they're willing to hand their minds and hearts over to that rule, they're the kind of people who, if you even kind of start skirting around that meta conversation, all the red flags are going up, all the walls are going up, which is what happened. So afterwards, of course, I was pretty bummed out, and I left like not feeling great. And I called my friend Angie, who grew up in the same religion that I did and has since left, and is very sympathetic to the situation. And she's amazing. She just, I mean, I could not have asked for a better friend during all of this. Like, she just poured into me, and she was available. Like, I mean, she's got 2 kids, right? So it's not like she's not busy, but she was available to me whenever I needed somebody. And she was like she just accommodated me so much this weekend, and I can't even tell her, she was a true friend. And so I'm super grateful. Thank you, Angie. And she was like, hey, so you want to go out and talk about it? And I'm like, yep, let's go do it. And so we went out and had I had a lavender martini, and it was delightful. And we talked about the situation. And she said, at a certain point, she said, you're allowed to be angry at the religion if you want to be. Like, if that's true for you, she's like, you're allowed that. Because I never really show any anger for the religion. I did a lot of work early on to make sure that I didn't harbor anger, right? I didn't want to harbor any negative feelings like that. She's like, you're allowed to do that. And so I went in and I checked in, and I was like, is that a thing? Is that really something that's living inside me that I'm not acknowledging as my anger for this institution that has like done so much damage? Or at least in my life, done damage to me. And I came back with, I'm not angry, but I have a newfound respect. Like you said, this is a formidable opponent. These memes are formidable. Like, people live and die for them. And
wars are fought over memes.
Absolutely. And like, who did I think I was? I was going to waltz in there, right? Like, with all my tools and all my understandings and all development work I've done. And I was just going to waltz in and somehow take this meme on toe to toe and win. Yeah, I think that was some hubris on my part. So I have a newfound respect for like the memes. They will supplant biological love, right? Like the biological love that a parent has for their child. A really well-crafted meme will interrupt that. It will interrupt some of the deepest elements of human interaction.
It's appealing to something deeper than even the lizard brain wiring towards your child. Somehow it's tapping to something more profound for people, which often is a very spiritual element, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It transcends that lizard brain. It's almost a transcendent framework. At least that's how it's presented often.
Yeah, absolutely. And then of course there's a whole classification of people who are like, well, any loving religion would never make you stop talking to your children. So I think that there's one element of that. But then I look at memes, and they're not just religion, but there's we have memes for everything. anytime we're attaching ourselves to any sort of institution that lets us know how anything works, like how everything works, whether it be, I mean, we were just talking about it with a scientist friend of ours who's like, she's like, academia and science is totally religion and you cannot penetrate their borders, and creativity is not something they allow for. So as far as I'm concerned, academia is a meme, and
hashtags.
Yeah. Hashtags, right? Like these things, these movements and memes, I have a newfound respect for them. I always knew that they were a big deal, but I tipped my hat. You know what I mean? Like I went, okay, you are so much bigger than I gave you credit for. I kind of like had an experiential moment of that.
We talked about this on the podcast called Bully Memes, but it's more of an abstract conversation in the theoretical realm.
Yeah.
This is a super personal, experiential thing you're having with this.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not angry at it. I have a newfound awe or respect for it. Not necessarily positive, but I more acknowledge what I'm dealing with. And the other thing is that on a more personal level, I had to figure out how I was going to navigate through all of this without coming away kind of wounded. You know what I mean? Like, okay, how do I make sure that this is not going to take me out? And am I doing the things that I should be doing? Am I like healthy through all of this? And because at first when I drove away, I went, well, what did I expect? But then I thought I had to try. Just like we mentioned in the last podcast, or I mentioned in the last podcast, I couldn't think in terms of ROI. So what I had to do for me, I mean, I did this for all of us. I was really hoping that I would be able to have these conversations with my parents, that I would have the conversations that I would think would give them some peace of mind. But they didn't want that. They didn't want peace of mind because the peace of mind that I might give them, like there was too much danger of it coming along with a destabilizing perspective. So it wasn't peace of mind. It was the exact opposite in their opinion. And it's because they didn't know what I was going to talk to them about. They didn't know. And just me showing up is destabilizing. So, yeah, so it's like I think it would have been a much better conversation than they could have even imagined. But their level of fear was, I mean, it was like, you know, I mean, I was basically a black bear, or excuse me, a brown bear that was like, we should sit down and have tea. No, I promise I won't eat you. Like, yeah, but you're a brown bear. You're going to eat me. No. Like, I'm a different kind of brown bear. Like, that was basically the conversation we were having. I was like, no. You have the story of what I am, but I'm not the story you think I am. And we can have a real conversation. And they're like, no, there's no way I'm going to sit down and have this conversation with you because I know for a fact that this is going to eat everything up that is important to me. So it's sad that I didn't have that conversation. But then I left going, I did everything I could to soften them to me, to be able to have that conversation for them and me. And it didn't work out, and they didn't want it, and they asked me to let them die in peace. So I'm going away thinking I did everything I could. I did everything I could to have the conversation. And I was able to leave saying the thing I really wanted to say, which was thank you. Mm. And so, and so it was disappointing, but it was complete. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you tell the story, the way they're responding to you, I understand what you mean by, like, it feels complete even though it wasn't you weren't attached to outcome, but an outcome would have been, like, there was a better outcome than what happened. Like, you have a scale of positive, negative outcomes, right? And so the outcome is more negative than maybe you'd hope for. So I get what you're saying there. And what's so crazy is like, I remember watching the show Breaking Bad when the character Jesse comes home to his parents and he's like a drug addict and he'd gotten busted for like selling meth in his basement or something. And their whole lives had been like ripped apart by this. So when he comes, they basically have these really strong boundaries that he's like this drug addict. They can't let him in their house and all these requirements, and the way your parents talk or the way the story sounds, it's almost as if you're this heroin addict that like came home or you run meth. And the last time you were home, you stole all their stuff and you went out and like spent it all and shot up with drugs and you've destroyed their lives multiple times. And this is like the last straw. They're never going to let you do this again to them. There's finally a firm boundary. We can't even hear you because you'll talk us into letting you stay with us again, and then you're going to do heroin in our living room again, and all your junkie friends will come. I mean, this is the kind of this is what it sounds like they're talking to, somebody that's like got these issues going on. That's
what it felt like. It felt like they were basically like, we're not going to let you ruin our lives again.
Yeah. And it's so weird to me to hear. I mean, it's such out of frame for, I think, most people to hear that. It's like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, but I am that to them.
Yeah.
Like I am Shiva the Great Destroyer.
You're the the mental or meta perspective version of a heroin addict.
Well,
I mean, in a way, like a loose connection way.
Yeah.
You're basically a heroin addict, Antonia, is what I'm trying to say. But I mean, they're like you're saying, they're seeing that same energy come. That's such a disruptive energy that they have to almost have these, like I'm sure it breaks a parent's heart that has to keep their child who's on drugs out of their house, and often people can't do it. They just like literally let them keep taking from them or whatever because it's so difficult to create those boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah, no, I represent destruction. Mimetic destruction, and I'm sorry for that. What's interesting is that another thing that I was able to pick up through all these conversations, because I mean obviously when I'm saying that it's like we had like a very easy interchange. I mean, there are still things during that it was an easy interchange, but there are also still things that happened in that quote unquote easy interchange that were unpleasant. Like take, for example, if I said anything about what I've done, my dad immediately had to remind me that I'm not nearly as successful as my brother. It's like a compulsion of his. So I'm like, yeah, we just had our first book published. And he's like, well, Ty has like had 8 books published. And I'm like, yeah, I know, Dad. And he's like, and he's got a TV show. And I'm like, yeah, I know he does. It's like, yeah, I mean, I understand this is, and
we'll get on it.
Yeah. And I'm like, if mom ever needs anything, or if you guys ever need anything, let me know. I'm in a position to be able to help. And he's like, well, your brother's got a good thing going. And he's like, he's rolling in it. And I'm like, okay, Dad, I know you compulsively need to tell me how successful Ty is. I know that this is a compulsion, but it's like almost, and this is not just something he's done since I've been an adult or like since I've left the religion. Like he's done this literally my entire life. If anybody ever said how smart I was, he like had to tell them that Ty said 3-syllable words by the time he was 8 months old. Like that's just been a thing. And so I got to kind of observe for the first time in a long time since I've done a lot of work. I got to observe some of the habits that some of the like sort of the dynamic that probably didn't serve me, but that I had kind of forgotten on some level. So that was good and bad. I mean, it didn't feel good, but also at the same time, I was able to sort of navigate through that, which was good. But it's like, I think if I was listening to this podcast, I would think, well, obviously Antonia is going to paint it as positively as she can on her side and as negatively as she can on her parents' side. And this is my story. This is my perspective of what happened. It's my narrative. And so an outsider could have experienced it very differently than I did internally. But the one thing I really tried to do was I tried to be as heartfelt sincere as possible. Like that was my ballast. My magnet in the middle of the field was be gentle and be honest. Right. And so when my parents said things that I took exception to, I wasn't just rolling over. I was going like, that's not okay. Like when my dad threatened to call the police, the reason why is he kept telling me to stop talking. And I was beseeching him. I was like, Dad, like mom just said something that about how she thinks I think that I don't think. And so like, I didn't just immediately stop talking when he told me to be quiet. And that was so infuriating to him that he escalated instantaneously by threatening to call the police. Now, I think it was an empty threat. I think, but I've seen my dad get into I know he was his crack cocaine was anger. Like that's always been he just has a temper. And I know that about him. And he works really hard to not show his temper to the public, but I've observed his temper many times. And why would I think that he had done any work on it, right? Like why would he have needed to? And so like, it sounds crazy to have me sit there, be speaking reasonably, and then have my 78-year-old father threaten to call the police on me simply because he's telling me to be quiet and I'm not just rolling over and being quiet. Now, I could have rolled over. I could have just he could have said, be quiet, and I could have observed that he is the person who gets to determine the behavior in his house, and I could have just been quiet, but I wasn't. So I didn't maneuver this as beautifully as maybe I could have. But at the same time, I wanted to be really sincere about the reason why I was there, which was the thank you. And I think the most hurtful thing in all of it was when I said, yeah, I'm here to tell Dad thank you, when he accused me of being insincere in that moment by saying, I just sound like I'm repeating a script.
I think that's when I said the comment, it wasn't supposed to go down this way. I think the reason I said that was it's almost like ending on a good note or having any good, like threatening to call the police, telling you were doing things in a script. It can't be a good situation from their perspective. At least this is how I'm hearing it from what you're telling me. I wasn't there. I didn't see it go down. I'm hearing this. And it sounds like they needed it to be wrought with conflict or filled with conflict, have discord, have a break of connection, have something bad to be okay with the fact that there's going to be this, quite possibly a severing permanently of a relationship forever.
Yeah.
And it can't be severed on a good note. That doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah. It's almost like it has to be a make wrong.
Yeah.
Somebody's got, like, if you're going to break relationship, it's got to be somebody's to blame.
Yeah. Well, I hear this too, and I'm like, why did you let them get off the hook? Why did you go ahead and voluntarily say, okay, this is the last time you'll hear me? And I'm like, my instinct is to get angry with you and be like, what? You did all the work to build a relationship as much as you could and keep this going, and now you're just going to give up and like surrender. In fact, it's now the narrative could quite easily be you're the one that cut it off. They could go back to their church, to friends, and say, oh, she said she's never going to see us again, and she walked out our door and said, that's it, you'll never see me again. Yeah, why'd you do that, Antonia? You gave them the perfect script. You gave them the perfect scenario. And I think that's how I felt. But as the more I'm hearing you talk, I'm changing my perspective a little bit to say, maybe I would have played it differently. Maybe I would have made it to not let them get off the hook, because this impacts my daughter, not just you, right? Like, this impacts Piper, who's 6 and is in love with your parents. Every time she sees them, she looks forward to it. And there's family history there. And there's a connection point with grandparents, which I value highly as an ethic of mine. So I'm like, why'd you do this? I'm almost frustrated with you. But then I realize, like you said, this moment of let us die in peace, it might be an expression of love to allow them to have the last thing they're holding on to, which is this hope they have in this faith that they've given everything to. And by you saying, okay, look, I'm not going to push it, this will be the last time you see me, not only are you giving them a gift of allowing them to hold on to a hope that if they let go of, they might have a lot of other things crumble around them, but you've taken it upon yourself to be the one to initiate the break, because obviously they keep allowing you to come around because it's unnatural for a parent to distance themselves from a child. So even in the midst of you feeling bad about the connection being broken, allowing them to have their quote unquote die in peace dignity of their belief structure, you took the lead from my perspective, as a more mature person, and you did something that was in their immediate best interest, or at least allowing them to die in peace. Like, you broke the connection on their behalf because they were unable to do it. And it ultimately gives them some peace and some closure. And even though it isn't something like, maybe I'm like going back going, man, you should fight harder for this. Maybe this was the right choice as I'm hearing it. I don't know. I haven't really, again, we're talking about this live on the air. Yeah. So I haven't thought through this enough to really formulate all of my thoughts or perspectives around it. But that's like my first initial, like, sum it up kind of perspective.
It's intended to be a gift. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but considering that I got about 2 seconds into a conversation and my dad exploded and threatened to call the police, I don't know if there was any way that I, with my skill level of development, could have navigated through that conversation in any way that would have made it, like, somebody maybe way more skilled than me in communication, somebody who's like way, way, way better and a lot less threatening, may have been able to do it. But I don't think that I can do it. I don't think it's within my ability to navigate to the place where we could actually have a real conversation. And so it's intended to be a parting gift. And I'm okay with being, I don't want to be a martyr here and be like, I'm okay with being the bad guy. I'll be the bad guy, go back to church and tell everybody how I'm the bad guy, and I'll just take it. Like, this is not intended to be a martyr position. Like, this, this is what they need from me, if this is their final request, I will give them their final request in true gratitude, and I will do what I need to do now for me, because here's the result. The result is I'm now working on, and pretty much about 95% of the way through, of closing a chapter. Like my parents actually gave me a gift, which is that I don't need to do a bunch of mental gymnastics trying to figure out how to reach them anymore. I don't need to figure out what exactly is it that they want me to be doing here in this situation versus in that situation. And what do I need to do to make sure that they have a relationship with Piper? And oh my gosh, like if I could just have this conversation with them, I think it would be so much better for our relationship. Like that's all done. That's all complete. I don't have to think about that anymore. So I'm going to recoup that mental real estate. I'm going to. If it's throwing good money after bad, quote unquote, if that's what's happening here, if every time I reach out, I'm only making it worse for everybody, then that means that I get to take back that emotional and psychological real estate and apply it to other things. Maybe my daughter, right? Or other relationships in my life, or maybe my business or my mission, who knows? But I'm also recouping something in all of this, which I don't know if that sounds cold or not, but that's basically what I've decided to do. Is I'm going, okay, I will complete this too.
So there's closure is what you're saying. It's not just an open loop all the time. You have, even if it wasn't the closed door you want, there's still a closed door.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for a sense of resting into that and feeling like, okay, I can let the psychic energy go. And we talked about this on that cord cutting episode. It's almost like you cut a cord in a way with your parents. There's no longer an energetic tether.
Yeah.
And what's nice about it is from your side, the door is, you've made it very clear to them from what you're telling me that the door's still open.
Well, I guess if we're going to use this metaphor, it's not locked. It's by no means locked.
Just knock.
Yeah, just knock. If the door is not locked on to you. So I'm going to close it in the sense that I'm not going to let I'm not going to let the energy rush out, but it's not locked. So all you have to do is knock on it and I will gladly reopen it. But for the time being, as far as I could tell, that this was a very final request from them. And so I'm going to make that assumption. I'm going to believe them when they ask me to go away. I'm going to believe that that's what they want.
Is this an extension to Piper too? Is she like...
She's like, they effectively said that anytime they see me or Piper, it's too painful for them.
So we have to figure out what we're going to tell Piper.
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I still have to figure that out. And I'm not going to stop my child from pursuing them. If she gets older and they're still alive and she wants to pursue them, I'm not going to stop her from doing that. So they might have to have a different conversation with her. And I will be radically honest about why I'm not having a relationship with them anymore. So, yeah. So what's happened on my side is there's two big things that came from it. The first was what I just mentioned, which is that I get to receive that real estate back. The second thing is that I spent the entire next day 100% in self-care. I don't think I've ever done that on that level, and it was revolutionary. Like, I cannot articulate the importance of self-care through things like this. So the first thing I did was I got a 90-minute appointment in a sensory deprivation tank, like a float tank, which was fantastic, by the way. 90 minutes wasn't nearly enough. But I also I was in Oregon, so I took a cannabis mint beforehand. So I was in a relaxed state, and then I went in there, and it was like complete and total zen. And then when I got out, I could tell that I had some emotion that I was having trouble accessing. So I went and found something that was tragic that I knew would make me cry. So I chose the final. I mean, if you're into Game of Thrones and you don't know this, my apologies for the spoiler. But I'll just say this: the etymology of Hodar's name, right? The scene in Game of Thrones. I can't remember which season it is, 6 or 7 or something. Where you find out how Hodar got his name, that scene, I watched it over and over and over. And then I would watch like YouTube reaction videos of other people watching it over and over because it makes me cry every time. I just turn into a blubbering idiot. So what I did is I found the emotion of tragedy inside myself by experiencing it like through Hodar's story. And so when I would start crying through the tragedy, then I would realign. I'd look for inside me what was making me feel that way inside that had nothing to do with that. So I found the emotion I needed, and then I matched it to what was going on for me. And I was able to process a lot through that. And maybe there's other ENTPs out there or NTPs. I personally have a huge struggle in finding my emotions when I'm feeling it, but I knew this one just by its information was a tragedy. This is a tragedy for me. So I had to go find tragedy in order to help get to the emotional experience I was having. It kind of made me think of like an Iron Man. In the first I think it was the first or second Iron Man movie. I think Tony Stark is an ENTP. I'll probably get a bunch of people arguing with me on that, but I think that's usually what the internet also says is he's probably an ENTP, and I would completely agree with that. And there's a scene where he's like working on something that has to do with a laser, and he turns the laser on, and it hits the wall. It's not like, it's like 2 feet from the target.
Uncalibrated. Yeah,
it's totally uncalibrated. And then after the laser is on, then he moves it to his target, and there's like a burn mark in the wall, right? And I'm like, that's such an ENTP thing to do. Turn the laser on and then calibrate it. Who cares about the burn mark on the wall, right? Anyway, that's kind of how I felt I was doing with my emotion is I like found the emotion. It was like the laser. I like turned on the emotion, and then I readjusted it or calibrated it to the target, which was what was going on for me. Does that make sense?
I'm a feeler, so sort of. I mean, it comes so natural to me that I'm like, what the heck? All these gymnastics to get to an emotion, what? But I could see the access point through your 10-year-old of Harmony.
Yeah.
Wanting to, like, it's almost about the emotion first, and then you have to feel like then you get to the meaning of it after.
Yeah, like I got to go find, like I have to have, I mean, I had the emotion first, and then I found its personal, it's how it struck me.
I think I do the same thing, but it's just so much faster, so it doesn't feel like 2 steps.
Yeah.
For I think feelers, it feels all like 1 step.
Yeah, this was like a sluggish process for me. Anyway, but that's what I did. So I just kept watching it over and over, and every time I watched it, it would strike me the same way, and I would start crying, and it was tragic. And then I would like process through the tragedy of what I was experiencing and sort of the meaning and the contrast, right? Like Hodar's story is like, he couldn't do anything about it, and this is something that happened to him, but he still did the honorable thing, and he was still an amazing, like he was still a hero, and I'm like, and I didn't ask for what I experienced either. And I'm like, and it just happened to me. But of course it didn't. It's all the culmination of my decisions too. But part of this is something I couldn't control. So it wasn't like I was trying to make myself like Hodor necessarily, but it was more like whatever parallels I could find in the story were very cathartic for me. I'll just say that. And it helped me process what was going on because I had something to contrast it with. So the ways in which I was sad and it was tragic that had nothing to do with Hodar's story, I was able to process through that too because I was able to see the contrast of the situation. Does that make any sense?
Totally, yeah.
Okay. So anyway, after the float tank, then I went through some of that processing. And then Mr. Rogers' documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor, was in a theater that was really close to my house. And so I ended up going and seeing that. And I knew I needed that. I needed to be in the presence of somebody who had such extraordinary and profound unconditional love. I just needed to bask in that. So I went and watched Won't You Be My Neighbor, and I just sobbed through the entire thing. Like, there were so many moments that made me cry. And Mr. Rogers is just just a genius. For what he did, he was a genius at agape principled love. Like I just an absolutely extraordinary human being.
And empathizing with children and their experience on a true core level.
Yeah.
And really understanding them. I think you're right.
Yeah, it was just extraordinary. So I went and did that. And then I went and read. And at the end of the day, I was so nourished. I was I had fed myself and nourished myself with everything I needed that I was like, I think I can completely and utterly manage this. I think I can get through it. But I needed that day of just me and self-care, me and anything I needed to do. Like that was 100% my day. And it was exactly what I needed. So by the time the next day came along and I needed to head home, I was ready. I was like, I think this is okay. Now I know that probably at some point in the future, it'll strike me. I'll have to process through it. I'm sure it's not over. I'm sure I've not cleansed myself of this entire experience, but that initial tourniquet, right, of self-care Like that initial, like I addressed the problem very quickly. And so I think that, I don't know, I think I feel very cathartic about all this. Like I said, it wasn't ideal. It wasn't what I wanted, but I feel complete at the end of all of it.
Well, and I think the bigger thing too is you're not going to go another decade and one or both of your parents either get very sickly or pass away, and you're going to say, remember that one time I had the instinct to go fly to Oregon and talk to my parents and I didn't take it. I really regret not doing that. What would have happened had I gone? And I think you made a choice to take action, a mistake of commission rather than a mistake of omission, right? And I think, I don't know, like I look at that and I think that you are feeling closure. You made a choice to take action on something. You didn't really have a lot of expectations or outcome, but it didn't go in the best way that you could see it going. It went maybe more of a, not the closure you wanted, maybe, but it's closure nonetheless, and you can look back without regrets. And I think that's really the thing from my side, is to look at that as an inspiring example for me, and maybe you listening. I don't know how you feel about it, but I see it as an inspiring example of not just going through life with what ifs and never taking action on them. And I think that's the biggest lesson I'm taking from this is we're not guaranteed tomorrow. We only have today and the present moment and what we're involved in right now. And I think taking the actions you did is powerful. It says something.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know how inspiring it is because it didn't turn out.
But you can't control the turnout. And that's something you couldn't have predicted.
Yeah. Yeah, I can appreciate that.
It's not only inspiring if it's like a good ending to the story.
That's true, right? Like it doesn't always have to turn out. I would say though that I think though through all of this, I am feeling peace. Like I don't know why, except that I feel like I did my best. I did everything I could. Like I expressed so much willingness to come to them. Like I came all the way to their sandbox. I did everything I could to have as positive an interaction and engagement with them as I could. And even with my own limitations in there, right? Even with me not acting perfectly, like I could have probably done something or said something different. I was a little salty a couple times, but that was what I could do, right? Like I did everything I could do at my current level of limitation, and I feel peace about that. Like I feel like if I recoup that emotional real estate, it's not me just shutting off from them. Like they very definitively made sure that on their side, they're recouping their stuff, basically. That's what the interaction did, is that they basically told me that they don't want to have to throw anything more at me. They can't give me any more than they've given me as parents. Like they're done. They've got to recoup everything for themselves for this final exit. And I said, okay. And so I get to recoup mine, right? I get to take that real estate back too. And like you said, the cord's cut. So yeah. I feel like it was good. I think I did exactly what I needed to do.
Well, as we wind down, this has been a very different podcast if you're a new listener. This is not typically how these podcasts go, a little more focused on personal growth topics or personality style topics. So this is a little more freeform, more of a conversation about something very personal. Antonia, I want to thank you for spending the time to unpack this. I know it's super vulnerable, and I appreciate your candor and your ability to go here and be vulnerable in a very public, situation where you could share your heart and your experience with not just me, but you listening. And I think that's really powerful. So thank you so much for being willing to do that. And you might have been listening and maybe personal stuff came up for you and you feel very much like you want to share your story, really. Come over to personalityhacker.com and we'd love to hear your story, your perspective, What are some ahas maybe you've had in your life in dealing with your parents, or maybe you've had children that you've had some conversations with? There's a dynamic in all of our lives between our parents, our children, our siblings. Like, family is very complicated. Friends are complicated. Life is complicated, and it's messy. It's real and it's messy. And it doesn't matter how much personal growth work you do, you are going to be challenged with other people and situations in life. And there's never a guarantee that it's going to be smooth sailing. But we do recommend that you build the skills and the insights that will help move you through those experiences in the best way possible, because you can't predict what those will be, but you can be equipped to deal with them as they come. So come over to personalityhacker.com, share your story with us and the community that's there. We'd love to hear from you and have you be a part of this conversation. You can also join our community of like minds over at facebook.com/personalityhacker or twitter.com/personalityhack, HACK.
Yeah. And our book is out. We did a quiet release before, but now our book is out and you can get it on Amazon. It's called Personality Hacker. And let us know what you think about it. Let us know if you like it. It's available, and I like to think it's a good one. So go check it out. And if you enjoyed our podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. And if you want to do us a big favor, you can leave us a rating and review on iTunes.
I'm Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.